but also a busy time in the transfer market for the Whitecaps. Kenji Cabrera coming to the Whitecaps. We spoke about Pedro Vite leaving last week, but the Whitecaps making moves in this transfer window. Manuel, what can you tell us about Cabrera, who's now announced with the Whitecaps, as well as maybe some more stuff that's coming down the line for the Vancouver Whitecaps?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great signing. Kenji Cabrera, I spoke to our team in Peru, Transfermarkt team in Peru, and they really liked him. An emerging star, young player, on the verge of making the national team. Can play on the wing, can play in midfield, is very dynamic. Most importantly, young, right? Had an exit clause, so relatively cheap, about 1.2 million US dollars. So it only takes up a third of what they received initially for Pedro Vite, right? And so can play the positions and fill the void that Vite has left, and that is a big departure for the club, even though like his form kind of dipped lately. It's probably the transfer talks that caused that, but they moved really fast to have a replacement in hand, to make this a smooth transition. And I personally think this could be the sort of thing where we're looking down the road and say, hey, they may be even upgraded here, right? Of course, you're coming in from Peru, you're playing the league there, and then you're going to MLS. We know it's physical. There's a lot of travel involved and all that sort of stuff. So the transition can be hard, right? But I do really like this transfer, and I do understand that they're not quite done yet, and we're not at the stage where we can share names. But since the start of the season, they have been looking for someone to replace Stuart Armstrong, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have a few names in mind. I know there was a list leaked early in the spring with a few names. Some of them have now moved on. Peter Stanic is one, right, who is now playing in Bulgaria, so he's off that list. But Fitz is another one who's probably going to stay in Austria. And then Poreba was one from Hamburg as well, who's moving within Germany, it sounds like. So, but those are the kind of names that they've been linked to. And I think the names that they're looking for, they want a ball progressing number 8 to help Gold and help Cabrera, the new signing. So lots going on at the Whitecaps.
And Brendan, when you look at this Whitecaps team as well, like, it's clear that they're not in the best of form, but how important was this last week for the club, getting that win over Houston and seemingly kind of getting back to a little bit of that identity that they had earlier in the season, even though it's a very different starting 11 than they were rolling out at that point?
Yeah, you'd hope so. I mean, they do kind of feel like, and since that loss in Vancouver, in Mexico City, excuse me, to Cruz Azul, they do kind of feel like they're waiting to turn the page, and whether that's the return of Ryan Gauld, which we've all been anticipating, or whether that's a couple new bodies through the door. Manuel, when you first reported that they had come to agreements with an extension for Vite, I thought that was it. I thought he was at least seeing out the rest of the season. I never thought that they were looking to move him on.
So. I have a bit on that too. I mean, that is really interesting, right? Because it got leaked that he had signed an extension and the club was ready to announce. And there's so many reports out there where the quotes were in it, and the club then never announced the actual signing, right? The signing of the contract extension, even though it was done. But I understand on the eve of that contract extension, like the deal was done, the agent came with an offer from a Brazilian club. And that Brazilian club had previously signed a player from MLS before and still owed the league money. And so that deal was then quickly thrown out the window, and Whitecaps thought, okay, well, now we can announce. And then the agent came, around the corner with yet another offer. And this time it was Pumas, and Pumas, offered $3 million US after tax and salary to Pedro Vite. And then, the club thought, okay, well, in fairness, this is something we can't match. We just re-signed you to a TAM deal, $1.7 million US, right? That is the max that you can go under the MLS salary cap rules. And so, they opened talks and they had a figure in mind and said, like, if Pumas can meet that figure, and that figure was $6 million US, and they got there, including the bonuses, right, they would do it. But I mean, everyone thought, okay, they signed Pedro Vite. Vite was happy here. His goal was to make the national team play for Ecuador, the club at the World Cup in next year, right? And it just seemed like the place to do it because he was playing regularly. But I understand there's also was some pressure from in Ecuador to have that he needed to play in what they perceive a bigger league. I'm not sure Liga MX is that much of a step up. I'm also not sure this is a great career move for him because, if you're on $3 million after tax, how many clubs in the top 4 leagues can pay that, right? Like even in the Premier League, that is a lot of money. Unless you go to one of the top 3-4 clubs in any of the top 4 leagues, you're not making that sort of money. And so, this could be one where we're looking back and said, like, yeah, he makes a lot of money now, but his career kind of stalled there. But that's where we're at. And that's why, Whitecaps thought they had this done and dusted. And then, of course, the reality of the market hit them hard.
It's interesting there because I imagine the Brazilian club that you did not name, they rhyme with like Road to Fogo and their owner is American or something like that.
No, it's not them.
Different.
But that's a good guess. It's a good guess.
So I was gonna say, at least Brazil, there's been a bit more of a like direct pipeline to Europe for players versus Liga MX. That's kind of been a big problem, right? That a lot of players kind of get on big salaries and kind of get stuck there.
Well, you essentially, if you want to get on Liga MX and go to Europe, you oftentimes have to accept a lower salary after tax, right? Not before necessarily, but after tax. That's the big difference right there.